and welcome to another webinar at the National Library of Scotland. My name is Kenny Redpath and I'm the Events Officer at the Library. Tonight I'm delighted to be introducing Helen Moncrieff and Dr. Jolene Hughes, who are here to give us a talk called Nature Prescriptions, From Local Idea to Global Media Storm. Now, I'll let both speakers do all the talking, but suffice to say that with spring just around the corner here in the UK, it's a perfectly apt and timely event that I know, having met the speakers, you will love. Helen Moncrieff was raised on the family croft in the south mainland of Shetland. She spent her early years working in nature conservation and went on to gain an honours degree through the University of East Anglia. Helen returned to Shetland to work as summer warden for RSPB Scotland. After a couple of years with the Shetland Crofting and Farming Wildlife Advisory Group as the Shetland Biodiversity Officer, she returned to the RSPB working on nature reserves and being an environmental educator, becoming the manager 4 years ago. Jolene Hughes has spent many wonderful years being involved in ecological and biodiversity conservation research. This has taken her from the Canadian High Arctic to the Antarctic Peninsula, watching among many things, including hummingbirds and snow leopards. Jolene's research interests now lie in studying people for the benefit of nature conservation. As a principal conservation scientist for RSPB, Jolene is exploring the relationship between nature, human, and conservation, with particular interest in the concept of connection to nature and how this may affect pro-conservation behaviour change. But before handing over to Helen and Jolene, can I just say that there will be a chance for questions at the end of the webinar, so get thinking and just type in your questions into the Q&A function, and we will do our best to get through as many as we can. We thought as well, quite a nice idea with that is if you tell us where you're at, where you're from, and just give us maybe 3 things that help you through nature. That might be a really nice talking point for us later on. But for now, I'm delighted to firstly hand over to Helen and then Julie. Thank you very much.
Hello, and lovely to see you all in this virtual world. First, I should say that I come to you as no health expert. I'm just a local lass that loves nature and I really like helping folk. But my health knowledge comes from my own life experience, and nature has helped me in my physical, emotional and mental health in challenging times. The RSPB is a wildlife charity, but we are a people charity too. And we're keen to celebrate nature and its benefits to as many folk as possible. So thanks to the National Library of Scotland for inviting us here to speak to you tonight. And it's a privilege to share the work we've been doing with audience across Scotland and beyond. So along with my colleague Jolene, we'll be speaking about why a nature conservation charity is interested in human health, the importance of connecting with nature, and we'll tell you the story in Nature's prescriptions so far, and we'll give you a couple of tools at the end that could help you. But before I go on, I must thank the people that have helped to bring this story to you. I'll start with thanking the NHS in Shetland, including the GPs, practice managers and health improvement team and their communication staff. And thanks to the Edinburgh and Lothians Health Foundation for working with us, and they're including the nature prescriptions in the Green Health Strategy in NHS Lothian. And then a massive thank you to the 5 practices that have taken part in our urban pilot in Edinburgh. That's St Tridwana's Medical Practice, East Craigs Medical Centre, Leith Mount Surgery, Inch Park Surgery and Mill Lane Surgery. And of course, thanks to all of our RSPB colleagues and the supporters that's helped bring us here. So all being well with technology, we're going to show you a video that's just been released on RSPB Scotland's YouTube channel just this morning. If your internet struggles with it, the library will send a link along with a feedback form after the event. And then after the film, Jolene's going to take up the story. So I hope you enjoy this.
I think there's very good evidence for the benefit of being out in nature for all aspects of physical health and mental health.
I've got a seat regularly by the window, so I can sit for ages and just watch what comes into the garden. Things would be a lot worse with well, I can't imagine what it would be without the garden.
There's a lot of people with real anxiety and sort of mental health issues, and it helps them with their sleep, helps reduce those anxiety levels. It can really help a lot of people. So and it's free and it's easy and it's accessible, so might as well give it a go. My name's Madeline Housden. I'm a doctor at Barclays Medical Practice in East Craigs. Life can be stressful, life can be busy for anybody, and going outside and kind of connecting with nature and thinking, like looking around you, realising the seasons are changing, I just think makes you feel better. And I think lots of patients would benefit from it, a whole array of patients as well. Asking them not just to kind of, just get out, but also to kind of connect with nature. So, noticing that things are growing and the seasons are changing, like listening out for birds and looking out for kind of different things to enjoy. And I think that helps kind of calm people down, reduces anxiety, helps them get fitter.
I'm Rachel Harrison. I'm one of the GPs from Mill Lane Surgery in Leith, and this is my allotment here, which I've had for about 30 years. This is the only place I really can relax and everything goes out of my head when I'm working here. I go home a lot nicer person than I arrived, so I'm going to be much less irritable with my family, and I've found a calmness here that I don't really find anywhere else.
How do you think of it? Is is Oasis too much?
No, it's my paradise. It's a place of real safety. Safety for safety for the soul even. The research is huge now, demonstrating how much of a benefit people can get from spending time in nature. We need trees and vegetation and greenery to be well in ourselves. And if you have a way of interacting with that, with nature, that's hugely important.
My name's Mark Hayward. We're in a garden that I've started to create back in 2013, and sort of evolved from initially just having a couple of bird feeders, and it's slowly morphed into something a whole lot bigger. It's important to me, personally, for my well-being. I mean, I've suffered from depression in the past. I went through a bad patch between 2015 and 2017, and just having the garden as an opportunity to get out and do things within it alleviates all sorts of stress. You just get on with doing things in the garden, and I found it a massive benefit. I've got a seat regularly by the window, so I can sit for ages and just watch what comes into the garden, and things would be a lot worse with well, I can't imagine what it would be without the garden. Every day is different. You never know what's going to turn up in the garden. Some things more exciting than others.
If you didn't have this garden, where do you think you'd be?
I think my mental state would be a whole lot worse.
People really enjoy the resources that have been given to them. So you don't just prescribe them a walk. You also, the RSPB's done some great resources that are like calendars. What to look out for each month, and then a kind of 30-day plan to get into nature as well. And I think that's provided people with maybe some ideas that they hadn't originally thought of. Lots of people go for walks, you know, they go walk their dog, you know, they go and enjoy their green spaces and things. But it's not just about that, it's about kind of connecting with nature and just kind of getting in tune with nature so that you can, it's kind of practicing mindfulness in a way, and, you know, trying to reduce our stress levels, anxiety levels. And that's the key, is trying to get people to understand that. So that's why the resources that have been given are so good, because it helps people kind of, you know, realise that that is a possibility.
When I first looked at it, I thought, oh, you know, people are going to think I'm really stupid saying, look at a leaf, you know, smell a flower. But no, people have actually really embraced it, and they've said how delighted they've been just to remember the small things. I think what's really nice is hearing people's accounts of what they've changed since giving them the nature prescriptions. And it's maybe not anything that they hadn't done before, but it's a reminder. And one woman said to me, she said, I used to only ever go out with the children. And now I realise that actually I love going out on my own. And sometimes I just leave the kids with their dad and I go out by myself and spend time walking along the river, for example. And that makes me feel so much better.
Hello, well that was brilliant. Thank you. I'm Jaylin Hughes, and I was just gonna, after that wonderful video, we thought we'd show you that just because it's such a lovely piece of storytelling about this project, and it gives you a good insights into the background. And I will now sort of start to explain where it comes from and why we're involved in it. I think so. Next slide, please. And the next one. So as we've heard in the video, there's increasing interest in the good that can come from being in nature. So there's along with this, there's increasing scientific evidence to show that activity in nature can provide a range of health and well-being benefits for people. So these are, you know, can be preventative or curative. So they might stave off ill health or cure some situations people are in. They've also been shown to be various benefits. Psychological, stress reduction is a big one that people have looked into. Physiological, so not just green spaces and nature being a nicer place to exercise and encouraging people to do so, but also reducing the pollution or heat stress around us. And there can be social benefits. So by being active in nature is often done in social groups that changes people's social interaction, more support, more community engagement, which is better for community well-being, and individuals get friendships and hierarchies change so they feel better. This is all well and good for people, but as a biodiversity conservation organisation, so as a nature organisation that RSPB is, why are we interested in it? So next slide. So the problem we face in the UK is, as a conservation organisation, is that UK public engagement with biodiversity loss is quite low. So on this slide here, you can see 3 years of data. These are from national surveys that look at the UK public and their engagement with the concept of biodiversity loss. So if we go to the final column, which was 2018, you can see that in 31%, so the bar at the bottom, are those unaware and unengaged and unaware of biodiversity loss. Above that, we have a small 10% of people that are aware of biodiversity loss, but not concerned about it. Above that, the 49% is people showing some engagement. So they're aware of the biodiversity loss, they are concerned about it, but possibly not doing too much, 1 to 2 things, if that, a day. And it is the 11% at the top that are highly engaged with this crisis. So that's not a lot of people at the UK population. If we go to the next slide, this shows, as a slight tangent, in Scotland, the situation is slightly better. And over the last, between 2014 and 2017, those highly engaged increased from 12 to 20%, which is great to see. And also those not aware of biodiversity loss as an issue, that species and plants and animals and wildlife are declining. Those not aware of that has also declined, which is great. However, there is still a bit of an issue about those showing some engagement, and those aware of it but not concerned of it is a bit of a mess at the moment, and we want those figures to reduce and become more engaged. So we know, as a conservation organisation, to address this biodiversity crisis, we need to get more people more highly engaged with nature and valuing and acting for it. How do we do that? So go on to the next slide. The key here is, one way to do this is engaging people and building their connection to nature. So connection to nature is a complex character trait. People connect to nature in a variety of different ways and get a lot of different things from it. For example, it can be, for some people, it's part of their sense of self, their identity. Others, it might be a sense of safety, empathy with species, with wildlife and plants and animals. It gives people freedom, sense of responsibility or enjoyment. So there's a whole different range of emotions that come with this. It's also slightly, it's influenced by our behaviours, so our learned behaviours from our peers and friends and family. Our knowledge, our understanding of what species are also influence it, but it's predominantly an emotional relationship. And the term connection to nature is considered to describe an individual's enduring relationship with nature. So if we go to the next slide. So we know a connection to nature correlates with better, sorry, that clicked on a bit quickly, but it correlates with taking more action for nature, which is what, as a conservation organisation, we want. If you click on again, it also correlates, connection to nature, a stronger connection to nature also correlates with better health and well-being. So this has been shown in a variety of ways. So more surrounding green space for people has been linked with better health indices. For example, lower cardiovascular mortality rates for people living in greener areas. Interaction with nature has been shown time and time again to improve people's mood. Self-reported happiness increases in a variety of circumstances. People have shown better resilience after interacting with nature. And on a more deeper level, studies have shown that there's improvement in people's perceptions of their own life. They feel that their life is more meaningful as well. So all of these things are incredibly important and incredibly beneficial things that come from a connection to nature. So given a connection to nature helps both conservation and people's personal health and well-being, how do we go about helping people develop that? You start off with a person. They bring a whole lot to a situation, experience, expectations, personal characteristics, and you get them involved with a nature activity. So this will be suited to them, but there'll be a whole range of those that will attract a whole range of different people. Whatever that nature activity is, we hope it bring out some short-term outcomes and an increase in their state connection to nature. So they might really enjoy it in that moment and they have a real appreciation for nature in the short term. What we hope, nature connection only happens over long time, so you need to repeat this experience. So what we hope is that these short-term benefits will lead to a short-term behaviour, which is just engaging with it again in the first instance. And that repetition, so they go and do perhaps the same behaviour again, perhaps something else that in nature, another experience somewhere else. Repeating that cycle will then over time lead to a development of a trait connection to nature in the long term. And this will then over time lead to long-term conservation behaviours. And that's where we think it will be really beneficial. So that first bit is where, for us, the interest of the health and well-being benefits that nature can provide lie. It can motivate people that have no interest in nature as it is, or little interest in conservation, to get involved in nature. So those short-term personal intrinsic benefits of a health and well-being outcome will motivate them to get into nature, lead to those short-term behaviours and get them to repeat it. And this is what the programme of nature prescriptions is trying to do. By instigating through GPs the prescription for nature, it will get people enjoying it. And Helen will now tell you about how that programme started.
So I thought I would start with a quick introduction to Shetland. We're famous for our culture and our heritage and for the natural world. And Shetland is home to amazing wildlife like puffins, seals, seabirds and orca, and smaller creatures like Edmondson's chickweed, an endemic plant that we've got. And just flashed up yonder that we'd most recently become famous for gritty crime dramas. I'm sure many of you have seen the Shetland drama on the telly. Whilst it is a drama and it is made up, it does highlight some of the problems we have in our community, like so folks struggling with addiction or loneliness or poor mental health. Shetland's a beautiful and sometimes bleak place. There's around 100 islands, we have a population of about 23,000 folk. And in the last full census of seabirds, there was, that's about 2,000, there was close to 1 million seabirds breeding here. We have amazing waders like the lapwings and curlews, and the sound is just so lovely to listen to, especially after a long winter. And then now as we're moving into summer, we'll see the landscape starting to come alive with the colours and the smell of the wild flowers. But just because there's an abundance in nature, that doesn't necessarily mean that folk are connected with it, nor feel inclined to take care of it. Even with the TV programmes like Simon King's Shetland Diaries and Spring Watch that are celebrating the wildlife that's right on our doorsteps. I ken plenty of folk that's never been looking for otters, or they've never been to Summer Head Nature Reserve to look at the Taminories. That's where we're named for puffins. And through our education work, we learned that only half of the primary school bairns had ever been rock pulling. And that really made me feel quite sad, because there's so much joy to be had for just gazing into the water and being curious about what's there. So we can go to the next slide, please. So this is, I'm very fortunate to have been brought up just right here. This is next to the Crofties Museum in Dunrossness. And my family lived here for generations, and they were deeply connected to nature, because that's what helped sustain them. They're connected with the sea, the land and the shore, and they had a very different life to what we live now. I took this picture just a couple of days ago, and if you could hear it, you would hear a Shetland wren just to the right, and a corby, a raven had flown over my head there. And I just had the lapwings doing their display calls for the first time this year. So it's a truly special place, and it's helped shape my identity and my sense of belonging. And sense of place, identity and belonging is all themes that's feeded into the Nature Prescriptions project. Now I mentioned before that I'm not a health expert, but I have learned from my own life experience and what's been passed on to me. And my mum, when she was 30, she got diagnosed with breast cancer, and it came back a few years later. So she'd underwent surgery and radiotherapy and was on medication for a long time. But as well as turning to the NHS that were brilliant, she also turned to the Natural Health Service. So she spent time doing by the shore because she'd heard that the older generations believed by being near seaweed that was beneficial to you. And she'd also heard that if you're near the earth that had been turned over, that was good for you. So she would take her sleeping bag and go and lie in the heather when my dad was working with the pits. And she also started keeping a gratitude journal back then, thinking that if you noticed the small and beautiful things, that would help you through dark times. And old wisdom is proven by modern science quite often, and I've recently learned through the University of Derby that if you get into a habit of noting down the 3 good things in nature, that's proven to have health benefits. So we'll be interested to see what you, if you contribute to the Q&A there, as Kenny mentioned earlier. So my mum would go along the shore and, oh sorry, next slide, sorry. She would go along the banks, along the cliffs and release her emotions to the wind and onto the waves. And I have to admit I do that too. And I'm blithe about in Shetland because I think I would get funny looks if I were to row and let loose in Princes Street or Arthur Street. But one day she was, this time of year actually, she was coming back Fair Walk because she'd had a further diagnosis that looked like she might not survive it. And as she walked back to the house, she spotted a solitary daisy. And a minder saying she felt like something had suddenly shifted in her, like a light bulb moment, but she felt physically lighter as well. And she just felt that she felt really pretty. She was small and like that daisy, and everything would be okay, that her life may come to an end, but life carries on in other ways. The seasons keep turning, life goes on, and there will be joy again. So I'm pleased to say that she did come through that period of illness, and Nature Prescriptions is part inspired by her. The next slide, please. So one of the main characters in the Nature Prescription story is Karen McKelvey. On her first day as Community Engagement Officer here in Shetland, I introduced her to a report, Natural Fit and Natural Thinking. So that's actually 2 reports that the RSPB had commissioned Dr. William Bird to write. I love that he's called William Bird. He's a former GP, and a quote from him stuck with us. And he said that nature and green space can be seen as a great outpatient department whose therapeutic value is yet to be fully realised. So we left things there for a while, but we always had in the back of our minds that we ought to be taking the findings from this reports and turning them into action. Into the next slide, please. So in 2017, we were thinking about how can we make nature more relevant to a wide and diverse audience. We've always delivered environmental education through schools and guided walks, community talks, but there's plenty of folk that we didn't meet. So inspired by the growing evidence proving that nature really is good for us, and a spoof advert that we'd seen on YouTube trying to sell nature as a pharmaceutical thing, the idea of Nature Prescriptions began to take form. But could we really get GPs to prescribe nature? Now, Karen had been working as a counsellor for Women's Aid, and she had a few friends that were GPs. So she started asking questions, doing a lot of research and designing a project. And one of the things she learned was a lot of doctors would turn to the outdoors for their health, but far fewer would actually recommend it to their patients. And she also learned about the financial savings that could be made to the NHS and to society. And she came across a number of studies that just had evidence of the physical and mental benefits. Like one was like patients were recovering more speedily following an operation if they could look onto plants. So we chose Shetland's ancient capital, Scalloway, to trial the project, and we chose this village for a number of reasons, partly because of its location, and the patient catchment area would include folk that were living in both built up and rural areas. So Karen got into the health centre and built up the trust there by using the evidence that she discovered and using her amazing powers of persuasion. So we're very grateful that Scalloway agreed to take part in a pretty 6-month project. And then after that, we're going to do a review, take lessons for it, and see if it's appropriate to roll out to the 10 health centres that we have across Shetland. On to the next slide, please. So what is Nature Prescriptions? So the concept is really simple. If the GP thinks the patient could benefit for time spent connecting with nature, they'll use the leaflet and the calendar as resources just to gently nudge folk outside. It was a really lovely process designing the calendars and the leaflets. We worked with GPs, practice manager, the health improvement team, somebody that's experienced in mindfulness, local bird watchers, the council's access officer, as well as our own experience in with the knowledge to design it. And although it's a quite simple concept, it's important to stress the amount of thought and discussion that get into the text and the design. So, for example, we had to be very careful with language. We learned that tick boxes is better than bullet points. We were sensitive that folk could and couldn't do things because of their health, or maybe they were housebound or living in poverty. And then from my experience of living with depression, I kent it was hard sometimes to get dressed, let alone think about leaving the house. So we tried to cover a lot of ground through the leaflet and the calendars. So in October 2018, having completed a successful pilot to Escalawa, we delivered the leaflets around the town surgeries, and Karen managed to make me a lot of GPs and nurses and health centre staff to introduce the project. And the health improvement team were monitoring it and promoting the prescriptions project in the surgeries. And NHS Shetland, Healthy Shetland webpage, we had the calendar downloadable on their website. And then one of our colleagues prepared a press release to do a soft launch to make sure Shetlanders were aware that this was now a thing. But the press release got it to sort of a bit wider than what we realised, and the phone started ringing, and the media really picked up on it. What was meant to be a local thing went global. Next slide. So the Guardian, they did a brilliant piece, and I noticed a lot of other sort of press outlets sort of copying for that one. The BBC National News had it on throughout the day. My doctor, Dr. Maudsley, he kindly wrote a piece for the New Statesman. And then there was a Radio Scotland phone-in that was trying to get a bit of controversy going by getting folk to call in and scorn the idea, saying, how would you feel if your doctor said hi to a horse? But everyone that phoned in loved it. There's this World Economic Forum video that was shared thousands of times. And then Karen appeared live on national radio and on an online TV panel show called The Round Table. And she was sitting alongside a professor from Finland and medical professionals. And that's probably not what she was expected to be doing on their first day at work a few years ago. So it was a crazy time, but ultimately a very productive time. And I have to sort of apologise and thank the NHS communications team, because we had really no idea how big this was going to go. They were getting, even months on, 3 inquiries a day. As a result of the media attention, we got folk from all around the world wanting to replicate the idea. There was the Danish government's National Stress Committee, Icelandic organisation to address absenteeism at work. There was an organisation for Australia working with Indigenous communities, and there was GPs for in Scotland that got in touch too. One important thing that really chuffed it happened was the British Medical Association covered it in the magazine The Doctor. So GPs could read what their peers had been doing. And I was delighted to read a quote from a Lerwick GP that said, time-pressured GPs can often give patients medication for mood disorders because that's what's available to us. We know it's not always the right thing because you could medicalise them or cause them harm, and doing things like this, nature prescriptions, can help. And I have a lot of male patients who say, I don't want pills, doctor, and I don't want to talk about it. So this is a potential way for getting to people. And for some people, it's a better option than a box of pills. And the article goes on to say that it might not be for everybody, but for those that want to have a go, it's risk-free, it's almost costless option in a GP's arsenal. And then a general practice assistant is best when they look at the causes of problems and options to tackle those drivers that are available. Sorry, I'm tripping on my words. So in the Shetland project, we didn't have a way of collecting feedback for patients, but I have had some anecdotal evidence. I was at a conference and this woman that I didn't ken was telling me about her friend who'd had a problem in their stomach, and her doctor had said you could try these pills, or you could try the nature prescriptions option, and if it doesn't work, then come back and you can get the medicine. And she's absolutely brilliant because she never had to go back to the doctor for that. And through the whole process of developing nature prescriptions, right back for the beginning, it's been really heartening to kind of there's a number of organisations working on health and nature connectedness. There's universities, green health partnerships, local groups and national charities. And as a result of the Shetland project, we're now in touch with folk for the Nature for Health Foundation in the Netherlands. So it's really, really good to kind of what's going on. Next slide. So the Shetland project was low input but high impact, and I think it just cost us a few £1,000s and staff time. And when we designed the project, we would like to have been able to replicate it and roll it out beyond Shetland. But could it really work in an urban environment like Edinburgh? So in September 2019, RSPB Scotland decided that we should go for it. We'd do an urban pilot and develop the project wider and revisit what's been happening in Shetland. And we recruited Elaine Bradley as the project development executive. And she's come with us brilliantly with 10 years of experience of teaching mindfulness, and she has a deep love of nature, so perfect for the job. And she could see that there's some crossovers between nature connectedness and mindfulness, such as present moment awareness, mindful inquiry, using the senses and noticing feelings in the body. So these things can help deepen nature connection, which makes this project really quite unique. To the next slide. Now, when I get down to Edinburgh to meet Elaine to start the process, we were walking down Leith Walk, and I had to say I thought we were going to be doomed before we ever even got started. I couldn't see a dandelion growing at the pavement or nothing. And I was reminded of the scene for Trainspotting when they get it into the hills and didn't kind of what to do. Why on earth go for a walk? And the amount of fresh air was going to help their lives. Next slide. So we took, Elaine came up to Shetland to learn for the experiences here. And this is her meeting Dr. Maudsley and McCartan. And it was important for her to get a feel for what Hyde and Hayden worked in Shetland. And we learned from Dr. Maudsley that the leaflet was key to the success of the project, and it was the only thing that he kept on his non-cluttered desk. And he said that for a patient to tuck the leaflet away in their hands was like them having a contract with themselves, and the media sort of coverage should have sort of normalised idea of prescribing nature. So that was really beneficial to kind of open up the conversations that he was having. Next slide, please. So since 2017, there's even more research about the benefits of connecting with nature for health. I follow the University of Derby's Nature Connectedness Research Group on their blogs, and then we've weaved the 5 pathways to nature connectedness into the new calendar that you're seeing here. And to get GPs involved in Edinburgh and then more broadly throughout Scotland, we needed to start providing evidence of the benefits of nature prescriptions. So we went back to our scientist, to Jolene. I'll pass back to you.
Yes, so we'll go to the next slide. So thinking about what evidence was needed and what this project could provide and help the situation was quite a conundrum. Privacy and sampling strategies mean it is nearly impossible to evaluate it from a patient's perspective. So we can't ask people about their personal health problems, and they won't be coming back to the surgery to fill in a questionnaire if they get better, which is what we hope. However, the unique aspect of this and a problem that many other social prescribing projects face is how to work with GPs and convincing GPs that this is an important thing. The unique aspect of this project is we're already working with GPs in these surgeries. GP trust is a massive issue in a lot of sort of social prescribing, and this isn't social prescribing because the GPs are prescribing themselves, but in these sort of new prescriptions that are coming out. GPs hold a position of trust with their patients, and they only have a very short time with them. So they're not going to, and we wouldn't want them to, for myself or anyone else, start prescribing any old intervention that an outside organisation suggests. So just because the RSPB has come along and said, here's a way of prescribing nature, we wouldn't want GPs to go, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea, I'll start doing it. We need to get them the evidence about how beneficial this is to their patients. And one of the best ways of doing that is sort of peer-to-peer influence and learning from their other GPs about how it works and what they use it for and how it's useful. And this is the unique aspect that nature prescriptions can provide. So we developed a short questionnaire that looks at what GPs are prescribing it for, the ones that are involved in this trial in Edinburgh. Who are they providing it to? Sort of in a very general, non-identifiable way for the patient. So we just look at age and gender and what kind of conditions are they prescribing it for. We've also asked GPs about their connection to nature. as it may be the GPs that are already more connected to nature are the ones that are happier about prescribing it. If you're a GP that isn't very connected to nature, will you be enthusiastic about this? And will that change over time as your practice starts doing it more, and as the people around you are prescribing nature, does your connection change? And a lot of this was based on Helen's experience in the Shetland, where she was talking to GPs that she knew and how the project started up. And they were saying it wasn't just beneficial for the patients, but beneficial for themselves. And especially when they were prescribing it, they were thinking about it more, and they would start appreciating it on their walks and on their journeys out into nature around them in Shetland. We're also going to be conducting semi-structured interviews with some GPs from the practices that are doing it to get their perceptions, not about the project, about nature prescriptions, how we could improve it and how, where it works, but also whether they think it works in general for a wide range of sort of conditions that they might be faced with, and how they think this can help other GPs. And it is this peer influence, this creating a social norm that prescribing nature is okay to do, that we hope will assist the medical community in taking it on. We click. As a wonderful benefit of this partnership that has been created with these 4 surgeries in Edinburgh, they actually have patient feedback systems, and they have enabled us to conduct a small patient survey amongst people that are being prescribed nature prescriptions. So here we are asking a few questions about what patients thought of it, about the materials, whether they did it, whether they took it up after they were given them, and whether they thought they were getting any benefits from, and will they keep it up. And this will be really crucial for information for the wider audience about whether this is actually connecting people to nature. And back to Helen.
Thank you. So the very first patient response came in last week, and I thought it was just so lovely to see this. And if anybody in the audience happens to be a patient that's been prescribed nature, do fill in your feedback forms, because it's really important to help us develop the project further. So Elaine had identified potential surgeries that would take part in the urban pilot. And she started developing maps for the local area that would be in the patient catchment area. And ideally, the project was going to start in March 2020, and we would have had a stand in the reception area and all this stuff there to help the project. But the pandemic began. So with the onset of COVID-19, we had to change the way that we did things, and much appreciation to the surgeries for keeping on going with it. So it was paused for a while. And I would say in many ways that the pandemic has helped to light a new awareness and appreciation for the green spaces that we've got. And there's been lots of reports of folk finding comfort in nature during lockdown. And GPs have told us about a growing number of patients that suffer from anxiety and insomnia and low mood, and that nature's prescriptions is needed more now than ever. And others have spoken about their own stress levels and how nature prescription materials have encouraged them to spend time in nature for their own health. And that's something that we're exploring as a part of this project, is how can we at the RSPB support NHS staff, especially after such a tremendously stressful year. So we're chuffed that we could restart the programme, the pilot, in October, and it's going to run on until June. And there's other aspects of the project that we've not spoken about here today, but I'll highlight one thing is we've done a session with the Edinburgh University first year medical students, and I would love if this could be, nature prescriptions could become a part of our doctors' training. And to the next slide. So we'll just end with this slide, which is a calendar that a colleague developed in response to lockdown last year. It's something that we downloaded as a PDF, and it's suitable for folk all across the UK, maybe even overseas as well. And some of the GPs in the pilot has been sending this out as fit notes, and hopefully folk will have found it helpful. So yeah, so you don't have to go through your GP to connect with nature, but hopefully this is going to help folk a bit more, just to nudge them out the door and deepen their connection to nature that they've got, and feel all the better for it. And that is our story so far.